Hello students, so today we will be starting with a new chapter. The new chapter, An Empire Across the Three Continents. This is the second chapter of class 11 of history book. Let us tell you the overview regarding the empire across the three continents. Now, the early empire. Now, what is the early empire and how that early empire was slowly being considered as the most powerful part of the other three continents? Now, the Roman Empire. You have heard about the common part of the Roman Empire. You see, Roman Empire was considered to be the powerful empire. But why it was considered to be the powerful empire? Now, the Roman Empire can be broadly divided into two phases, the early period and the late period. The beginning of the Roman Empire was considered to be the early period, and then comes the late period. The following part is considered to be the late period or the late part. It was divided by the 3rd century. It was divided as the early period and the late period during the 3rd century BCE. Now, on contrary, it can be called the beginning of the period of the early empire and the late empire. Now, you see, the early period and the late period is also considered to be the early empire and the late empire, and it was divided into two during the 3rd century BCE, as I have told you. The Roman Empire was culturally more diverse than that of the Iran. Now, the Roman Empire was much more diverse in comparison to the Iran. During that time, Iran was considered to be the Mesopotamia, which means the Roman Empire was much more powerful and much more diverse in comparison to Mesopotamia. The Parthians and later the Sassanians, the dynasties that ruled Iran, a much larger population than Iranian. Now, afterwards, the Parthians and the Sassanians came into Iran. Sassanian kings into Iran to rule Iran. They have controlled the whole part of the Iran in comparison to the Iranians as well. Now, the other foreign parts came, the Parthians and the Sassanians. You see, Iranians were there, but afterward, the Iran was captured by the Parthians and the Sassanians. They are considered to be more powerful in comparison to the Iranians. Now, for the purpose of administration, Latin and Greek was widely spoken. Now comes the Latin and Greek. Here, the Latin and Greek language was widely spoken during that time. The upper classes of the East spoke and wrote in Greek, and those of the West in Latin, and boundary between these broad languages somewhere came across the middle of the Mediterranean. Now, the Mediterranean comes near the parts of the Iran. Mediterranean is a sea. It comes near in the part of the Iran, and here you see in the upper classes of the East. The upper classes of the East used to speak and write in the Greek languages, and that part of the West used to write or speak in the Latin languages, and they were broadly being divided as because from the Mediterranean. From the Mediterranean itself only, those languages are being divided into the upper classes and the lower classes, or to the east part and to the west part. Remember this one, the upper classes of the East used to spoke and write in the Greek language, and the west part used to speak or write in the Latin language. All those who lived in the empire were subjects of the single ruler. Now, during that time, monarchy system was much common. As a result, the people used to be under one single ruler. There was one single ruler, and irrespective of the language they spoke and where they lived. Now you see, there was only one ruler, and they have to respect their ruler or abide by the ruler. As a result, during that time, the monarchy system was coming much in common during that time. As I have told you about the Greek and the Latin language was much common, or the most earliest language of the Roman Empire. Now we will be understanding about the old Roman Empire. Now this is the overview of the old Roman Empire. The early Roman Empire, 27 BCE to 3rd century BCE. This is the ruins of the Roman Empire. You can see how Roman Empire was much advanced during that time. And here, these are all carved with stones, not bricks. Stones was much common during that time, and people used to make all the buildings or all the monuments with the help of the stones itself. You can see the ruins of the Roman Empire. This is the early Roman Empire, the ruins of the early Roman Empire. As we have understood about the early Roman Empire, now comes the next part of the early empire of Rome, the regime. You see, the regime established by Augustus. You see, Augustus was the early emperor of the Roman Empire. Augustus was the early emperor of the Roman Empire. The first emperor in 2000 BCE was called the Principate. Very, very important. The first emperor. The first emperor of the Roman Empire during 27 BCE was called the Principate. He was considered to be the Principate, which means the respected of all and to be the most considered of all. Although Augustus was the sole ruler and the only real source of authority was considered the leading citizen. Now, though Augustus was the sole ruler, he was the only single ruler, but he was also considered to be the leading citizen of that place. You see, here there comes the sole ruler as well and the leading citizen as well. Senate. Now comes the term Senate. You see, Senate, as the name suggests, the body which has controlled Rome. The Senate existed in Rome for centuries and had remained a body representing the aristocracy. Now, if I talk about the Senate considers the part of the aristocracy. They are considered to be the aristocracy. First comes the emperor and then it is followed by the Senate. You see, Senate is the part of the aristocracy or a body representing the Senate. That is the wealthiest families of the Roman and later the Italian descent, the landowners. Now, first comes the emperor, then it is followed by the Senate, and then comes the wealthiest family, the Italian descent, the landowners. There comes the landowners. You see, it has been divided into several hierarchy, you can say. It has been a hierarchy. First comes the emperor, then comes the Senate, and then comes the landowners. The wealthiest of the Italian descent is considered to be the landowners. Now, next to the emperor and the Senate, the other key institution of the imperial rule was the army. Now comes the army. You see, during that time, the Roman army was considered to be the most powerful. And if the army is not respected, then there comes the violation of the rule, or you can say a fight between the emperor and the army. First comes the emperor, the Senate, and then comes the army, the imperial army. For that reason, it is considered to be the imperial army. Augustan age. Now comes the Augustan age. This is the note that Augustan age is remembered to be the age of peace. During that time, people were in peace when Augustus was the emperor. It ushered in after decades of internal strife and centuries after military conquest. Now you see, Augustan age was considered to be the age of peace, but afterwards there came the decades of internal strife and military. Now, which means military was conquering the whole empire and there was a civil war after Augustus died. One thing regarding Augustus. Augustus was the first emperor of the Roman Empire and also he was considered to be the leading citizen. When he became the emperor, he became emperor in 27 BCE. Afterwards, his son followed to be the king. This is the picture of the Augustus. This is the stone engraved into Augustus and here the picture, which has been said that it can be Augustus or Augustus can be look like him. You can see the picture of Augustus. You see this stone, the carving of the stones are much more common in the places of Rome. They are being kept in the museums, as you can see. I hope you have understood the reign of the Augustus. Now comes the imperial army. You see, this is one of the important topics that we will be understanding about the imperial army. Now you see, what do you mean by the imperial army and why Augustus was much more fond of the imperial army? It was a paid professional army where soldiers had to put in a minimum of 25 years of service. The existence of this is wrong. The existence of an army was a distinctive feature of a Roman Empire. Now you see, during that time, army was a paid professional and they have to give the service of 25 years, which means the army were being the paid professional. Monthly, they used to get a salary or an income. As a result, they have to serve 25 years of service, and it was compulsory for all the individual soldiers to go for the 25 years of service. Now, The existence of the army was considered to be the distinctive feature. First comes the emperor, the senate, and here comes the imperial army, and this is one of the distinctive feature of the Roman Empire. The army was the largest single organized body. Now, the army was the largest single organized body in the army, in the empire, and it certainly has the power to determine the fate of the emperors. You see here, during that time, if army is not strong, which means the emperor is not strong. The army actually used to protect the emperors during that time. As a result, the emperor was much more reliable or much more dependent on the army itself. So as a result, the Roman Empire used to invest much more on the generals of army. The soldiers would constantly agitate for better wages and service conditions. This agitation often took the form of mutinies. Now, as it is the 25 years of service, an army was considered to be the important feature of the Roman Empire. As a result, there was agitation for better wages and good service condition. So as a result, when they never used to get a paid wages or enough wages to be paid to them, there was agitation among the army and the emperor. The Senate indeed hated and feared the army because it was often a source of unpredictable violence. Now, if I talk about the Senate here, the Senate used to hate or used to be or used to ignore the army. They feared the army. Why they feared the army? You see, the army used to create much more violence. If wages are not paid to them properly, if there is no service condition provided to the army, as a result, what had happened? There was agitation, there was violence, and an army can create unpredictable violence anytime. So as a result, the Senate was much more afraid of the army. Now you see, this is the army. During that time, Roman Empire used to have an imperial army, which was much more a distinctive feature of the Roman Empire. You can see how they are dressed. This is one of the picture of the Roman Empire, the Roman army that I have portrayed here. I hope you have understood about the imperial army, and much of the question come regarding the imperial army. I hope you have understood this topic. Now comes the three main players. As we have understood about the emperor, the senate, and the imperial army, we will now be understanding about the three main players and what are the three main players. You see, to sum up, the emperor, the aristocracy, and the army were the three main players in the political history of the empire. Now comes the emperor. First comes the emperor, second comes the aristocracy. The aristocracy comprises the senate. Senate is the part of the aristocracy. Here it is defined as the aristocracy, and then comes the army. These three are considered to be the main players of the Roman Empire, or you can say in the political history of the empire. The success of the individual emperors depended on the control of the army, and when the armies were divided, the result was usually the civil war. Now, the success of the individual emperors, how much the emperors has been successful just because for the working of the army. Now, if the army has been divided, if the army are considered to be divided, then there creates a civil war. As a result, the army has to be much more strong and organized so that the emperor can stay protected. The first 2 centuries were on the whole free from civil war, and this sense relatively stable. Now, the first 2 centuries. You see, when the army was strong, as a result, the first 2 centuries of the Roman Empire was very much of a stable kind. During that time, it was very much stable, but slowly, the army started agitation and violence started. Succession to the throne was based as far as possible on the family descent, either natural or adoptive, and even the army was strongly wedded to the principle. Now you see, becoming the king or becoming the emperor of a particular empire, one king becomes the king, and then it was being followed by his son, and another one will be followed by his grandson. You see, the succession was much more common in the monarchy empire, in the monarchy system. As a result, the army has also no complaint over that. The army cannot complain regarding the natural succession process of the monarchy. You see, succession to the throne. The succession to the throne is much more common into the family descent. The family descendants are much more common to the throne of the empire, against which the army cannot go through. I hope you have understood regarding the 3 main players of the three main players of the emperor. If you like my class, then do like and subscribe my subscribe Bhadra Academy. And also, if you want to know any of the courses regarding Bhadra Academy, you can call in 863 383 91721. Thank you for the class.